Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Urne, A Feast on Sorrow, out August 11th on Candlelight Records. This album has 8 tracks, 51 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a UK metal band. Now this album, from a design point of view, it's really well crafted, it's really well put together. It's an album that feels balanced and concise on one hand, but it's definitely not repetitive on the other. You find a lot of ebbs and flows, you find a lot of mobility. It's a very dynamic record, but it never loses track of what it is. The spinal cord, the main influence of this album, is present in every single song. And it comes across in the darkness, in the heaviness, in the aggression and intensity that the overall album has. So using that as the backbone of the experience of each and every single song allows the album to feel, like I said, balanced. It allows the album to feel connected. But then the differences that emerge from track to track, the different instruments that they use, or the diversity of instrumentation that they use, either be a piano intro or an acoustic guitar or an acoustic guitar outro, whatever the case might be, really adds life, energy, and movement to the individual songs that makes the album feel a lot more dynamic, that gives energy to the experience, that allows the album to come to life, and the overall navigation of this record becomes a little bit easier. It's easier to see the path in front of you when the album has these sort of attributes. Considering how dark, how dense it is, these little nuances from track to track and within tracks really allow the album to be easier to digest, easier to process, and overall easy to enjoy. As far as the sound is concerned, this to me feels like a blackened thrash metal album. And this perhaps plays a role in the overall aggression and the overall intensity that the album has. It also plays a role in that darkness that becomes a little bit of the common denominator throughout the entire album. I love the heaviness of this record. I love the direct approach of this record. But perhaps the thing that I love the most about this album is that it's an album that's not overly produced. It's an album that feels very organic, it feels very raw. The record was produced by Joe Duplantier of Gojira, and I feel like he understood what inspired this album. I feel like he understood completely the vision that the band had. And in order to deliver that vision and bring it to life, you have to create an album that is just a little bit raw or rough around the edges so that you can get the essence of each and every single song musically and then obviously vocally coming through. A lot of the roughness around the guitar playing, not overly cleaning those riffs, not overly cleaning those edges, really allows this album to have that sort of different side effect or different mentality that impacts the listener in a different way. Hearing the fingers, sliding through the strings adds a different feel. It adds a different atmosphere to the tracks. It adds a different level of darkness to how these songs are coming across. And this is not an album that offers a lot of moments of clarity. There are a few pockets here and there, but it's really about how you navigate the different shades of darkness. So having that more raw approach to the overall production of the album enhances the impact of the record, it enhances the aggression of the album, and enhances the intensity of the record. Now, for those coming in expecting an overly polished album, this record is going to be a complete miss. But if you don't understand the vision, if you don't understand the influences, if you don't understand what inspired this record, then you're not going to be able to get the emotional drive and the emotional baggage that is present in this album across every single element, from the lyrical content to the sound to the atmosphere. And like I said, the guitars play a huge role in this sound. I honestly really enjoy the overall guitar experience. The heaviness of the guitars, the chunkiness of the riffs, the distortion that just creates a little bit of a fuzz at times. Using acoustic guitars, going into the heavier side of the guitar sound, not being afraid of playing with the performance of the guitars, or the execution, I should say, of the guitars from track to track, in order to give it more of a driven vibe, more of a thrash metal vibe, or bringing in more of a black metal vibe and allowing things to be a little bit more sunken in, allowing the overall sound to be a little bit deeper. So the guitars play a huge role and how this album comes across and how this album feels. even though I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is a guitar-driven record. I think this is an album that depends heavily on the guitars, but it's not completely defined by the guitars themselves. The drums also play an important role on this album. I love the essence of the drum sound. I love how big it is, how thick it is, how powerful it is, but not necessarily overpowering. It always feels like it pushes themselves, the drums push themselves to the limit until they start to touch in the borders where the guitar sound is residing. And when they reach those borders, they tend to stop there in order to create an overall big experience, in order to create a thick experience all around, but not drowning anything else in them. They have their own space to breathe, they have their own space to coexist, and they coexist extremely well, becoming a little bit of a duo as far as what really drives this record. And it's not to say that the bass, for example, doesn't play a role, because the bass really pops on this album as well. But the bass is popping in a way that maybe creates a little bit of the nuances or the shades of darkness that the album has, or at least it helps define them, maybe making them a little bit more palpable for the listener. But this is an album where the bass comes in by sitting in the back seat and then allows the two front seats to be taken by the guitars and drums. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, the overall feel of the soundscape on this album. Now, vocally, Joe's vocals are on point. Very dynamic, very dynamic. Perhaps the most dynamic element of this record is the overall vocal performance. The range is outstanding. I don't think you can define emotion, and I don't think you can define that organic energy that this album has, that sense of carrying that baggage, that emotional baggage that's definitely present on this album, without changing your approach, without playing with your range, and finding the right tonality, the right delivery for the right song and for the right lyrical content that that song wants to put forward. If you have a one-size-fits-all, you start to really limit yourself in what you can offer to the listener. So allowing the sound to be more balanced, or allowing the sound to be dynamic but still always bringing you back to the original roots, is the right format that then allows the vocals to be a lot more different, allows the vocals to be a lot more diverse, giving or injecting life in the album with a different piece of this puzzle. But I honestly really enjoy the vocal performance from start to finish. Some of the moments where you feel like there is a little bit of room to breathe, they come in the vocals more so than anything else. The clean vocals really help set the tone, really help give you the right momentums in order for you to be able to then digest the heavier side of the album, the more intense side of the album. And I'm not even speaking from a musical side of things, I'm talking just about from an overall vocal performance. So it's a very dynamic, it feels to me a very difficult vocal performance. It feels like it's one of those that not that you have to work through, but you're putting a lot of yourself in it, and you're not really hiding anything behind it. So you become a little bit more naked, you become a little bit more vulnerable, and all of that came across not just in the overall record performance, but perhaps a little bit more specifically with how the vocals were put into place. When you look at this album, and when you look at the progression from the previous record into this one, it's without a shadow of a doubt a darker sounding album, a more driven, a heavier, aggressive, intense album all around. It's an album that has a place, but I feel like this could be also one of those albums that's going to define who the band is going to be going forward. It creates a very unique experience. It's a unique album all around. And when you create an album that is this unique, that offers this different side, like I said, a more vulnerable side of who you are as an artist, it's very difficult to put that genie back in the box. You can only start to move forward and experience it even more, and releasing it even more to the outside world. So I'm going to say that now, even though I don't think we can really define it until 2 more records come across, or 3 more records down the line. But I feel like this is going to be one of those defining records for Urne. It's one of those albums that you're always going to be able to look back upon and say that this record really changed from who the band used to be to who the band are now. It just has that vibe. I just get that spirit from it. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with The Flood Came Rushing In. This is the opening track on the album, and I think this is a track that sets the tone the mood of what the rest of the album is going to be all about. The guitars shred, they come in 100 miles an hour. And that lets you know that this is going to be an album that's not going to hold back, that it's not going to play with the atmospheres, but rather going to give you a very raw sound, a very direct, punchy sound all the way through, using the guitars and drums together, but then using the guitars a little bit to cut more through. And that's exactly what this track is, and overall that's kind of what this album is all about as well. The guitar sound pops off really well from that point of view. The vocals feel a little bit more at the distance. And that's also something interesting about this album, is that not only the vocal approach is different from song to song, the overall production around the vocals also changes slightly from track to track, so it meets where the vocals are and where they need to go. And in this specific case, the vocals really feel a little bit more distant to the sound, which allows them to travel and allows them to create a sense of depth within the overall song. It also adds a sense of distress to how they're delivered and how they come across. The solo on this song adds a little bit of a technical element, and for a track that's heavy, aggressive, intense, and straightforward, adding a technical element elevates the overall quality of the track. There is some melancholy in this song, specifically in the last third, but it's a track that comes back to its original standpoint and how it starts in terms of intensity and aggression. That's exactly how it ends. Next we have To Die Twice. Big sounding track. The vocals really create a dark atmosphere within this song. They create a sense of pain, they create a sense of suffering, they create a sense of the inevitable that's coming, and you just have to work your way through it. It's really impressive how they were able to paint that picture, more so than anything else, just with the vocal tone, the delivery, and the emotion that those vocals really carried. There are some more methodic elements within this track. Those methodic elements elevate the heavier side of the song. Emotional, you feel dragged through the entire track. The drum sound adds a little bit of a heartbeat. I wouldn't say soul, but definitely a heartbeat to how this track pumps and to how this track comes across. And that thick drum sound, guitar sound combination really adds to that overall heartbeat. It feels like it's coming off of your chest. That's kind of the vibe. Closing off with the acoustic guitar, it gives a sense of finality. It gives a sense of peace. And all that anxiety, all that feeling that the inevitable is just around the corner, now it's not around the corner anymore. Now it's right in front of you. That is how this track is built, and that is how they use the acoustic guitars to finish off this song. Last but definitely not least, A Feast on Sorrow. The piano opening, it really adds to that sorrow. It really adds to that sense of melancholy that the song has, at least as that starting point. But it leaves a breadcrumb in your mind. When the song starts off with that piano, regardless of how heavy it continues down the line, that piano, that sound, that experience kind of leaves a lasting impression throughout the entire song, even though it's just the intro. But you still cannot get away from how it made you feel. How it made you feel is how you stay feeling, even though the song changes. The guitars become thicker, the drums become more powerful. They really become a menacing duo the way the two work together. The vocals come in more in a cavernous style, not in distance, not traveling, not creating depth, but rather adding aggression, adding heaviness to the way the song is performed, even brutality to a certain extent. And then using clean vocals breaks that monotony, it breaks that feeling of aggression. It creates the pockets, it creates the ebbs and flows. It allows the song to breathe a little bit better, making the overall vocal performance more dynamic. Adding an outstanding solo, one of my favorites of the entire album on this song, also brings some clarity to a song that just feels like at times it's just it overtakes your senses. So it's a song that's heavy, aggressive, dark, and the darkness really permeates between the heavier side of that darkness with the more melancholic side of that darkness. Super interesting track all around. This is it, Urne, A Feast on Sorrow, out August 11th on Candlelight Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those, getting back to you. Take care, guys.